Welcome to CXO Unplugged, and today we're talking to Rosemary Howard, who's the Executive Director of AGSM Executive Programs. A lot of executives in there.
Absolutely,
Rosemary.
Phil.
So you've got an interesting background in that you're now really working, I guess it's the training sector that you're working in the business training sector now, but your background is very much from the commercial sector.
Yes.
And particularly Telstra.
Yes.
Where you were there for a number of years. And I want to talk about that first, because I think you've had an interesting experience at Telstra, in that you were working in the wholesale division of obviously a telco that dominated its sector. And then you went to work as a challenger working for Telstra Clear, where obviously Telecom New Zealand was the dominant player in the New Zealand market. So was there a huge difference in the culture moving from one to the other?
Yes, huge difference. And by the way, today we work with telecommunications companies in the leadership development space. Right. And I see exactly the same thing. So an incumbent is going to be much more highly structured, much more conservative, more cautious, far less risk-taking, but very much more predictable, if you like. Yeah. Whereas a challenger, you just don't have that same level of certainty and maturity in the environment. So the great thing, working for Telstra during that period of time, I was there 15 years or so, was to have that experience of working in the incumbent side when we were setting up wholesale as a new business. I mean, before that, Telstra had been a vertically integrated business. Yeah. Suddenly it was developing a wholesale business and a retail business, all new stuff. We didn't know how to sell to our competitors. We had, when I started, terrible debtor days, we had arbitrations, we had disputes worth over $1 billion. And then to turn that into an organisation that actually treated our competitors as customers and turned that into good business for Telstra, that was probably as big a change as then over in New Zealand, Telstra Clear, the challenger environment. You actually have, again, a part of Telstra, but it's now not the incumbent, it's playing on the other side. Yeah. And so telecommunications companies have become much more sophisticated over the last 15 to 20 years. Just like other sectors, they've got sold off by governments, and now they're starting to develop focuses on different parts of the market.
Right. But was it a disadvantage being the challenger and being part of a big company? Was the big company holding you back in any way?
No, not at all. Right. Because A, it helped me understand how an incumbent thinks. And in that case, in New Zealand, I was thinking about how Telecom New Zealand thought. But secondly, I had great leverage because I had a parent who was allowing us to run Telstra Clear as a challenger, differently from how you would run an incumbent. You have to. You've got to play the game quite differently. Yeah. But I had the resources and the strength and the backing of A, my experience, but most particularly of the resources of Telstra to back us up as we needed. And the interesting thing too, we could actually help Telstra from an experiential development point of view as well.
That was going to be my next question. Yeah. In fact, did Telstra learn anything from Telstra Clear?
Absolutely. So they would send people over to A, help us, but those people would go back with a whole new way of thinking about how challengers think. And actually to think about the strengths of challengers and what it is that incumbents can learn from that, and indeed vice versa.
Now, corporate Australia generally, I mean, you don't have to talk specifically about Telstra here or name names, but if you do, feel free. But do you think there are weaknesses in the way that Australian top management operates? We like to think we're the best in the world. Are we?
Well, we do like to think we're the best in the world, and right at the moment with the global financial crisis, I mean, here we are, the only developed country that looks like it's just about getting through unscathed.
We're doing pretty well, aren't we?
Yeah, we're doing very well. And if you look at, for example, our superannuation funds management, we're the 4th biggest in the world, so we're definitely punching above our weight. But on the other hand, there are some other statistics that really are concerning. And sometimes we sort of park those. But if you look at, for example, the level of innovation in this country, we're at the bottom of the OECD. Collaboration between companies and universities, we're at the bottom of the OECD. The percentage of our economy online, 3%, versus the best is Sweden at 20%. And again, that 3%, we're at the bottom of the OECD. The greening of the economy, hallelujah, we're starting to think about green jobs. But we're 7 years behind Europe in terms of actually getting in place a carbon trading system. And now, you know, we get excited when green jobs are people, and no disregard whatsoever, but putting big pink bats in roofs. Now, that's great. But what we also need to do is to develop the leadership and management capability to lead our investment in green jobs, not just in sort of, you know, vocational jobs, which are also important, but you need the whole vertical integration of the sector.
So it's part and parcel of the same problem, isn't it? I mean, being slow to realise the need for environmental sustainability and innovation. I mean, in both cases, it's management teams just not moving on and moving forwards. I guess being too stuck in the old ways.
Well, we've been talking about this lately here as to why exactly is this so, and I think part of it is, you know, Australia was so lucky. We are the lucky country. But as we've talked about for some time, the unlucky side of that equation is we don't have the burning platform. So we get a bit lazy.
Yeah.
And so really we are lucky. We are an amazingly lucky country. But let's use that and take it to the next level. So, you know, we're doing okay, and you asked about senior levels of leadership. We've got some great Australians who've gone overseas and led overseas companies. So clearly we have got some greatness around that. But as well, if you look at, say, the ASX top 30 or 50, there are a lot of overseas CEOs in that mix. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we should be benchmarking ourselves against the world's best practice.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think we do have a cultural cringe, or else a real cringe, that we think overseas people are by definition better. So are we really world's best practice? Do we need to bring in people from overseas? And if we do, let's learn from them. But let's actually make sure we're getting our leadership and management up to best practice.
One of those blow-ins from overseas, the CEO of the company you left, I don't think many people have been saying great things about him.
Well, it's interesting. You're talking about Sol, and of course, for 4 years, people did tend to say great things about him, generally speaking. Although I do notice since he's gone, people generally aren't saying great things about him. So it's interesting how things change. There's no
Perhaps
question.
they were scared of him.
There's no question. He brought some great strengths. I mean, his ability to bring a real sophistication of marketing, if you like, the American very scientific approach to marketing to Telstra and to this country, is a real strength, and he had some people in underneath him who brought that very scientific, disciplined approach. Great, fantastic. But on the other hand, did he understand the extent to which we were a different country from, e.g. America, where actually this country was already on a journey. It was on a journey to say you're going to have a competitive telecommunications sector. It's going to have choice and competition. And I don't think he understood that we were on that journey, and he tried to go backwards. And we now have the response from the government, if you like, the regulatory overhang that was destined to come. The pendulum had swung back too far.
Yeah, that's right. So you mentioned complacency before, but you were saying perhaps Sol did bring a depth of thought that perhaps didn't exist before. Do you think that's common in business? You know, that complacency is meaning we're not thinking about things as much as we might?
Well, I think that we always have to benchmark ourselves against what best practice is. And sometimes we're going to have best practice, and we should check that and know that we've got best practice because we've actually checked that we are best practice. We shouldn't just assume we're best practice. You know, we're proudly Aussie, aren't we? And sometimes we make an assumption that we're best practice when we are not. Now, in many areas, we are not best practice. So let's go out and benchmark ourselves. And the best part of change management, as you know, you look at what someone else has done somewhere else, how they've done it, and you, if you like, you compare where you are and what you can do and learn from them, and you sort of plagiarise and copy, and you can bring yourself up to best practice far more quickly than if you don't look out into the world and see what best practice looks like.
Yeah.
So I think we do need to keep doing that benchmarking.
Yeah. And more regularly, probably.
Very regularly. And then use that knowledge to bring ourselves up. But I think